we told you guys that we were going to cover this yesterday, but I wanted a little more time to write this article. So Shia LaBeouf is starring in a new film written by Abel Ferreira called Padre Pio, after the saint that it's about.
Can you tell us first, before we get into it, who Padre Pio is? Because I had no idea.
Yeah, so he's a Catholic saint who lived in the 20th century. He died in 1968. He was a mystic. He at least is purported to have experienced visions, to have had the ability to read people's souls, to do healing, and also to bilocate. What
does that mean, bilocate?
Like, he would be seen and interacted with in multiple locations.
Cool.
Before and after his death. And it's also said that he physically fought with demons and with the devil, and he had stigmatic wounds on his hands and feet that happens when Christ's wounds, like the same place where Christ had wounds, present on somebody.
I did see that movie, Stigmata.
That's a movie?
There's a movie called Stigmata.
What is it about?
It's about, I have no recollection. It was just about,
okay.
I just remember it being about stigmata.
Yeah. So he also was investigated, like he had his stigmata investigated by the church. He wasn't universally believed when he was alive, but after his death, even during his life, he had a lot of like devotees essentially, and people who really respected him and venerated his spirituality and his piety, and people would just line up for days to go to confession with him and receive the sacraments from him and just be near him. And after his death, there have been a lot of miracles attributed to him. He was canonized in the Catholic Church in 2002. There's your overview for who this guy is.
And Shia LaBeouf is going to be playing him in the movie.
He's going to be playing Padre Pio. I think he met Abel Ferreira through, or one of the screenplay writers. There's two of them. I forget the name of the other one. He met them through a Zoom rehab type of therapy group.
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly AA, was it? It was some kind of spirituality Zoom discussion group that he was in when he was trying to repair his life in like 2019 or 2020. And then he stayed at Franciscan friary to prepare for this role. He originally thought that this role was going to save his career, because he was kind of in a self-destructive bout of his life.
Yeah, he called himself nuclear at that time. His agent wouldn't touch him. His own mom wouldn't talk to him. This is before the lawsuit with FKA Twigs.
Even before the lawsuit.
And so what I took from this is that he went in to find one thing, which was a way to repair his career, and he found something much, much deeper than that.
Repair himself spiritually and repair his relationships.
Yeah.
And then he ended up, in the process of preparing for this role, converting to Catholicism. So he recently did an interview that was like an hour and a half long with Bishop Robert Barron, he's the founder of Word on Fire. It's a Catholic ministry group. He has a pretty big podcast, and he's pretty well known on YouTube.
Yeah, he's got a pretty big following.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've known about him for a while. So they did a pretty long, mostly like unedited interview where they just talked about how he prepared for this movie, how he wanted to play the role, and then also how he fell in love with attending Latin Mass, and just really how he let go of his ego and his extreme need for control over his career and his life. So what I referred to as the lawsuit just now was a sexual battery case that was filed by his ex. She's also famous. She's a singer named FKA Twigs. Mm-hmm. She's actually going to be in, what is it, The Crow?
The Crow remake with her her current boyfriend or something.
That's filming right now, isn't it?
Yes.
They met on set for his autobiographical film, for Shia's autobiographical film Honey Boy, in 2018, and they didn't date for super long, but she alleges that during their relationship, he was physically abusive, that he like made her fear for her life at times, trying to run a car off the road when they were both in it, that he knowingly gave her an STD, that he choked her. I believe that he also hit her. That these are all the allegations in this lawsuit. And of course, like in the process, inflicted extreme emotional distress on her. And she believes she's entitled to damages. So this was filed in December 2020, and now he's scheduled to go to trial for this in April next year. So this is kind of looming over him while this film is about to come out, and I'm interested in how it's going to affect his public perception and also like the believability of this role. He's literally playing a saint.
Yeah.
And also, a lot of people still think of him as a monster.
Well, and he's still married to Mia Goth, right?
Yes, and they have a kid.
Yeah. So he's very complicated already.
A lot has happened in a very short period of time in his life.
I want to kind of operate under the principle, if we're to take him, not him, if we're to take what are the allegations of against him as true, right? Like, that's for the courts to decide. Obviously, that will be a civil proceeding, not a criminal proceeding. Yeah. If we operate under the assumption that what she's accusing him of is accurate, is that a problem in portraying this, or does it speak to the transformation that he's talking about having from playing this character into his personal life? Does that speak to his growth as a person?
Yeah, where I'm leaning is that it's entirely possible that he could be guilty of what is being alleged against him, but also that he did heal himself a lot in preparing for this movie, and that his religious conversion is a genuine movement of his heart, and that he is genuinely trying to be a better person.
Yeah.
All of that can be true at the same time, but that's not something that audiences are prepared for right now, because you're not allowed to be complicated and human and have a redemption arc,
especially
anymore.
With crimes against women,
especially if it's a sexual like misconduct situation.
Yeah, I think the sexual misconduct is like the biggest hurdle, because if he had been indicted for like tax fraud, right? What's Shakira going to jail for? They would be like, well, people make mistakes.
Sure. I would argue even violent crime is more forgivable to most of society than anything. Violent crime against other men is more forgivable than a sexual
any kind of
crime
domestic abuse or sexual misconduct
against a woman. Yes.
And I'm actually surprised that that's not looming over more of the media coverage of this film. But there was I saw a lot of headlines about his interview. It's interesting because this is what appears to be a real path to redemption for someone, but it can't be that way in the eyes of the media, because
they don't believe in redemption.
They don't believe in redemption. They also hate the Catholic Church.
Yeah. Yep.
So him converting to this religion that is universally kind of hated or like seen as okay to mock in Hollywood, it's not a PR decision. It clearly isn't the good PR decision for Shia LaBeouf.
It wouldn't do him any good. Not his
that
career.
Makes it more believable that this is a genuine place that he's been led to. Like, he's not trying to spin a story on us.
Yeah,
which I would be skeptical of.
Because my initial statement was like, I'm right. I think it's okay to at least be hesitant anytime somebody makes some type of drastic change like this. This comes from rehab and from that world where you hear people say that they're going to change hundreds of times, oftentimes before they actually do. And a lot of times when they actually do change, they don't announce it when it's happening, because the change is transformational and does not need to be announced.
If it's organic, you don't need to frame it to
It's
other
interesting.
people.
Did you say that he's working on this project with someone he met in like Zoom rehab, maybe therapy or something?
Yeah, it was he's already like an accomplished filmmaker, but they were in the same.
But like specifically the producer or something?
I forget the name of the guy.
Right.
I would need to go back to play the interview.
My point is just that like
that's how
Honey Boy is also a project that he wrote while he was in rehab. So there's not a specific point to this other than like he is clearly at his most maybe creative when being self-reflective, which isn't
in the
not
interview.
Predicted. I also think it's interesting that like I don't know how long they've been filming this, but his daughter, he has like a kid with Mia Goth who's like 5 months old. So in some ways, you know, it's just anecdotal, but people tend to find becoming a parent very impactful, and for a lot of people it does shift your perspective on, you know, things that you've been through or your like what your goals are in life, if you didn't already have, you know, certain priorities. So all of this is coming at a time of like, it seems like
extreme transition
or like growth, or like he is really searching for stuff now that he is not the like former teen star or kid star who's like struggling, right? Like who is he after that?
And oddly enough, he did not mention his like being married or being a father in the interview, even though it was intensely personal.
And
I mean, how do you confront that when you're like Catholic? You're a new Catholic, but also your relationship, like we don't know that Mia Goth is converting. Like I don't know. I don't think people who convert have to be perfect right away. Like it's a growth period, but like there's some clarification needed on how this is impacting his lifestyle, right?
Sure.
Is he Catholic in name only, or is he Catholic in day-to-day life?
It's unclear like where he's at in the catechetical process, but it seems that he in every way intends to become Catholic in every sense of the word. Like he wants to receive the Eucharist is what he was saying in the interview.
I think it'd be cool to see him like really find peace, because it does sound like, you know, he's a complicated person and he has done wrong, but also like I think he was very wronged as a child from what I understand. And like
really,
yeah, it sounds like lots of messed up stuff happened to him. Like he's a complicated person. I do think though, like
did you watch like Honey Boy?
Yeah, I did.
Did you gather that from it? From
oh,
Honey
it's like
Boy
blatant
then?
And obvious.
Okay.
He had a very abusive father is basically like the crux of it. Again, he has done wrong, and I think he has been wrong, but he also strikes me as someone who seems to be really struggling with identity. And so if this movie is impactful and it makes a lasting change in his life, which like it could, that'd be great. I am not ready to say that wouldn't have been influenced. Like if he was playing a Buddhist monk, he would have been maybe been like, oh, Buddhism makes sense too. Like I think people who
actually he references Buddhism a couple of times in that interview. And I want to point out that you said that he seems to do his best, or he gets a lot of inspiration from times of emotional turmoil. He actually points that out in the interview. He talks about the difference between different methods of acting, and that he's not cerebral, he's emotional in his acting portrayal, that he needs to really feel the character in a specific way. So perhaps the only roles that really he feels suited for right now when you're emotionally raw are roles that cut that deeply. Otherwise, he doesn't feel like he can get to the center of the character. I don't know if that's necessarily like I said, I was hesitant at first to be like, look, you maybe you dive that deeply into something and you feel that you've made this transformation, and maybe it's just him feeling the effects of what it was. But he's so well versed now in what he talked about that it feels like it's deeper than just a passing interest in something because of a role.
Yeah, like he said, the traditional Latin Mass is something I've been homesick for my entire life. Like, I don't take that lightly, even if you are a celebrity, and I am skeptical of anything celebrities do or say because it's inherently public and it does affect your career. That does seem genuine.
It could be as simple as like just the fact that he's admitting to falling into Catholicism when it's so not liked by Hollywood is enough of a reason to be like, what's the benefit of doing this? Like,
yeah, I mean, I suppose you could say it professionally will benefit him to be seen on screen again.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the film, regardless of what it means for him personally, actually, as a Catholic, and I think there could be like a peak for Catholic filmmaking.
As a Catholic, do you feel like he like finding religion at a time that was that tumultuous for him, meaning that they talk about in the interview that he was absolutely suicidal when he came into this role? Was that just the impetus that he needed to find, like, would he have been...
That his ego led him... It actually ended up being like the avenue through which he like found...
Would he have been able to do that if he wasn't in such a place?
If he wasn't motivated by like such selfish things,
then
he wouldn't have ended up in this situation.
Yep. So I
Wait,
find,
are you asking like he was able to convert because he?
I'm asking, does the rawness of his emotional state play a role in him finding it that way?
I think you would never be able to answer that without him. Like, that's up to him. I think there are people who are not going through times of severe stress who find religion and find it to be fulfilling and meaningful.
Is religion found?
Well,
but I'm saying for later converts, does it tend to come from a place of emotional turmoil, or does it tend to?
I mean,
people
not
just,
necessarily turmoil, but just a searching. And I think he had that. Like, I wrote that he had to draw upon his own inner turmoil for inspiration to retell Padre Pio's story, because even though Padre Pio was he's like revered as a man of incredible virtue, and he doesn't have the same like backstory or history that you could say LaBeouf has, he was still known to be troubled. He found his stigmata humiliating. He was kind of isolated socially.
Yeah.
He had to celebrate Mass alone in his room.
So he has to draw on his own experience, given his Shia LaBeouf has to recall
he
his
didn't
own,
fit into society, and also like Shia LaBeouf, I'm sure, feels that way. So
his own mom wouldn't talk to him. He said at this time, like he's like, his manager wouldn't talk to him, his mom wouldn't talk to him.
Yeah, because he was so, like, he said his mom was so ashamed of what came out about this lawsuit, like that he would treat someone like this.
His story, like that line though, like, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm pretty sure Justin Bieber at one point, because he like raced all of his cars and drugs and whatever he was into, like there was a time when it was reported that he and his mom had a really big rift. It's interesting because now he is very openly Christian. He's gotten married.
He's
like,
always been Catholic or Christian.
He's always been
Christian,
yeah. But not as like openly devout as he appears to be now. I mean, I do think that like part of religious conversion can come from emotional turmoil and searching, but I also think that like Shia LaBeouf in particular is a person in turmoil in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I do think that like I have no reason to root against him becoming Catholic. Like that's great if it finds, you know, whatever you need. He seems like he was on a pretty dark path. I just don't think that it's a straight and narrow. I mean, in some ways I don't want to equate it to recovery because I know that's not something I like can talk about very specifically, but like it's not always like I am now a Catholic and I'm moving forward. Like it's something that I think he will struggle with for a while, and like converting your lifestyle is more challenging than I think you realize. It's like when you find religion or you find sobriety or whatever else, like initially I assume there's a lot of euphoria with it, right?
There's the first year of sobriety for me, I remember being almost like a drug in and of itself, because the feeling of being clear-headed is almost like that in and of itself because you've been foggy for so long. So I have to ask, is Ezra Miller going to be able to find his way back through if he was to find religion?
Privately,
I was trying to think of who's in turmoil that could use some.
Like I don't think anyone is beyond help.
Yeah, and
I genuinely don't think that.
But I think you have to want help, and I think
that was a ridiculous example on my part.
And you have to be willing to not publicize your recovery to improve your career opportunities.
I also think that Ezra Miller doesn't have the incentives tethering him to Earth.
No, I was kidding.
Like,
I'm
being totally serious though. Like Shia LaBeouf, like. Clearly values his relationship with his mom. He's a like social person,
and his child,
and he has a child.
Wife. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like. Well, I mean, if he was dating someone while he was married to Mia Goth, it seems very complicated. But like, he has more incentive to think like I have to find a way here. Whereas Ezra Miller doesn't want to be accountable to anyone but himself, right? He wants to build his own doctrine. It's much like I don't think Jared Leto will ever convert to Catholicism because he'd have to bend to Catholicism and. Yeah. He doesn't want to. That's why he has the cult.
Yeah.
It reminded me of a clip came up last night, the Chris Pratt interview where he talks about finding grace and stuff like that. And it's so weird now to think that he's kind of like walked back religion. It does feel almost more cowardly in a way that he like walked it back after.
Did he? I mean, we talked about that, and I remember it was me and Lydia and you, and
I felt like he was walking it back. I felt like he was.
I think we kind of convinced you of that though, because at first you weren't like totally open to thinking he walked it back, because it's like why does he owe you the explanation anyways?
I would like to give him the benefit of the doubt, but he said, like, I'm like this poster boy for religion when he says, I'm not even that religious, or I'm like, that's walking it back.
And it's actually like, no, you've been outspoken about your faith. Don't act like you haven't been.
That was why I pulled that interview, that clip we got like struck for on here, because I played this clip where he talks about. It was
very explicitly
I think
faith-based.
That evangelical culture, like evangelicalism in America, comes with certain tenets of having to be outspoken about your faith. And so often I could imagine, being religious is a complicated journey. And while some people are consistent in their faith and they feel it always, like most people ebb and flow with it, right? And so if you're Chris Pratt, I don't think you necessarily want to be, I don't think anyone necessarily wants to be the poster boy for Christianity in an industry that hates it, because you're going to fail, and at times you are going to struggle with your identity as a Christian. And I think that's
you just shouldn't have said anything then and not responded. Should have just left it alone.
But I think that's part of it. Like, he doesn't want to have to be the voice of Christianity. Like, whenever they're like, Christian celebrity Chris Pratt, you know what I mean? Like, that's a lot of pressure for someone who's only human and who's ultimately going to evolve in their relationship with their religion.
I think this is why, like, as somebody who's not religious, talking about this stuff fills me with a lot of hope, even in a way, because of the concept of redemption in an industry that increasingly doesn't believe in redemption and talks a hell of a lot more about the concept of original sin than I hear from actual Christians these days. Social justice has its own version of original sin, and that's infected Hollywood to its core. So hearing the concept of redemption and people making mistakes, as somebody who's made a lot of mistakes, finds that strangely comforting in a way.
And it's not just the industry that is kind of trying to go beyond the need for redemption. It's all of society, and anyone feels like they could be in danger of being depersoned for
thank you
depersoned for their offense against whatever group, whatever public figure decides to flay them.
It also feels like,
so it's like, that's why we want stories like that so badly.
It also feels like that there will, like, for whatever struggles or things that happen within the church, that they're welcoming people at the height of their problems, right? At the when they're at the most tumultuous points in their life. So maybe that, for somebody who's not religious, sees that as like maybe that's why a lot of people find religion in prison. That's not uncommon for people to find religion in prison or in recovery.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very strong portion of a lot. It wasn't for me, but a lot of people in recovery find religion at that time because it's the only thing that they can find tangible to hold on to, given all he talks in this interview a lot about feeling like he was beyond redemption, like he was talking about dealing with people that were worse than him, who found salvation? I don't remember the word he said for it, but that that found their way back from far worse than even he had committed. So I think a lot of people are drawn to that. So.
I think there's like a hesitancy to explore religion. Like, some people have questions about it, but they feel like they are not ready yet to like they're still too imperfect to pursue it. Like, when you convert, the expectation is that you become perfect. Or when you, like, if you were raised in a Christian household and then you don't pursue it as an adult and then you decide you want to, it's like, well, but I'm not good enough yet, like, I'm going to mess it up, and so they delay doing it. And I think that when you're in a place where you more critically need help and you need guidance, you are much more like, well, this is where I am, so please help me, and it becomes easier. Like, I think that middle ground of not being in intense emotional crisis, or you're not behind bars, or you're just kind of living your life, but you're looking, it becomes more intimidating to try and say, like, I want to explore religion, but I feel like I am not there. I'm going to mess it up.
I also want to make, before we move on, I want to make one, I want to ask a couple of questions about the idea we've been pulling into. This wasn't on the docket for today, but we've been talking about parallel economies with the Daily Wire and with all these independent creators creating new media that's outside of the Hollywood bubble that's very clearly anti-Christian, anti-Catholic. I would caution a hesitancy for the Daily Wire to get into religious filmmaking for now, and lend it more towards independent people who are not connected with a company, because I think it will brand them in a way that they don't want to be right now, whether they are religious or not. I don't think it's a good idea for them to dip into that right now. Mel Gibson can reach more audiences with his religious films outside of that parallel economy. That I would just caution against that.
What was the Mark
Wahlberg?
Father Stu. Okay, would you count that as a religious movie, or was it a movie about a religious religious storyline? Do you know the distinction I'm trying to make?
It's better made than most religious
I'm
movies.
curious to see if there's ever a space to have religious storytelling that isn't like considered like a strictly religious film.
I feel like religious film has a negative connotation.
It's called faith-based in the Hollywood circles. They call it faith-based filmmaking.
Or faith-based has a negative connotation.
Yeah.
And
also,
that's because the production value has been like,
so low,
kind of crap for the religious movies.
Team.
Like it's been very Hallmark.
Father Stu looked very good.
Not in a
It's
good
not
way.
good.
Father Stu looked great. I enjoyed
fantastic.
Father Stu a lot. And I said that I'm the audience they should be searching for there, because I feel like I crap on like Marvel and them like looking for alternative audiences because they've got such a strong basis for their movies and everything altogether. But if you're trying to if the goal of the religion is to expand and find more, like you want to draw more people into faith, right?
Yeah.
That you need to do so in a way that reaches more than the people that are already there. You went to Father Stu, whether you like the movie or not, you already know what you believe. But somebody like me, who is a snob and will point out the flaws in the movie, making a good movie goes a long way in helping spread that message to somebody who might not normally come to see it. So I would like to see, if we are going to see religious movie making, come from independent filmmakers, not necessarily from a Daily Wire or Breitbart.
Because then it would just be too heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
Not organic.
It would be the same criticism that we give to movies that come from people from a complete left-leaning ideology. Like, if you're not able to appreciate the nuance, then like your film is not going to really reach impactfully a wide audience.
Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.